Da 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 da.
You know, that Democrats took that energy from the way you mentioned the Women's March, right? From the Women's March, from all of the marches, from, you know, the March for Our Lives and all of that, and they took that and they've taken it to the polls. And so we've seen in Virginia, we flipped 15 seats in the legislature, and 11 of those were women. That was a little bit of an untold story, and we were very proud of that, including the first 2 Latinas in the Virginia legislature, first Asian American woman, the first transgender woman, a woman named Jennifer Carroll Foy, who, if you don't know her name, you should, because that woman will be president one day. There's phenomenal people out there, and we keep having these victories, and we keep like still being like, I don't know, maybe, you know, that night I can tell you we were like, maybe we'll win 5 and it'll be great, and then, you know, 11 came in, would have been 12 literally except for a coin flip, and so the vote was legitimately tied. So that's the first thing I will say is vote. Make sure that you are registered. We saw it in New York. We've seen it all over the place, and especially in places where they're worried about keeping power. People get dropped off the rolls if you were an inactive voter, and in some states, inactive is defined as not voting in one election. So if in the last election you didn't vote, they may drop you off the rolls. And if you're in a state, and most of them do not have same-day registration, but if you're in a state that does not have same-day registration, you get there to vote and you discover you're not on the rolls. That's a big problem. So check now. Make sure that you are registered.
The app that she mentioned is called ResistBot. It will check your registration once a month, and I can't think of anything better. It's amazing what
That's
people
awesome.
can do.
That's really cool.
Very cool.
And then I do have a question. So you were talking about with Emily's list how a lot of times you have to go and you have to seek out a candidate, and you have to ask them and tell them that they can do it. So what does that look like? What kind of person are you looking for, and how do you find them?
It's a good question, and I will say it's happened a lot. Like this cycle, they're coming to us, which is a wonderful thing. What we look for is a person who, one, will do the work. Running is really, really hard. As someone who's worked on the campaign staff, I'm kind of glad to know it's hard, because it's hard for the staff. It should be hard for the candidate. But it's someone who will do the work, someone who is, I think, knows the district and has a reason for running. That's not usually a problem, because if you ask, and there have been some studies, I think the Barbara Lee Institute has done this, but where if you ask men why they're running for office, there are a variety of answers. Sometimes it's to get to the next step. Sometimes, you know, if you ask women, a plurality of them say, to fix a problem in my community. And so part of it is, do you have a reason for running? We don't tend to support people who are running just because they view it as something that would be cool, you know, or I would like to be elected. It's because they you know, and if you look at like Elizabeth Warren had a reason for run, you know, she's been a consumer advocate for a long time. She's the reason the CFPB exists. So a piece of it is that. A piece of it is, does it feel like you are you work within the district, and that's also changing, right? I think it used to be, you know, there's a knock that Emily's List only supports conservative candidates. That's not the truth. We are in some conservative districts, and in those places, I mean, again, as I mentioned, you have to be pro-choice Democratic woman to get endorsed by Emily's List. So we're not looking at, you know, we're not Republican, we're not anti-choice, like that, you have to be pro-choice. But beyond that, we don't have policy criteria. We want to know that you're going to do the work and that you're going to be able to tell a story that engages voters. And I will tell you, it's the most compelling thing about this cycle, and a lot of it, I think, comes from first-time candidates. These women are running because of their story. So when they talk about, I would say most of our women, if there's one issue that really resonates, it's healthcare. And they're not talking about, well, we need to repeal, you know, this is what we need to do with the, you know, Obamacare fixes and blah, blah, blah. They're talking about Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, who lost her mother because she didn't have health care, and by the time she went to the hospital, her cancer was untreatable, you know, by the time they discovered it. Cindy Axne in Iowa, who, this is one of my favorite stories because it's a little less tragic than some of them. Cindy didn't have money for the maternity rider on her health insurance. She and her husband just couldn't afford it. They were starting a business. They just thought, we can't do it. and Cindy had a baby.
And let me just say, how absurd is that to have a
Right,
rider
a
for
rider for
maternity
maternity care.
coverage?
Cindy had a baby, and they literally sold a bunch of their possessions on eBay to pay for the hospital bill. That these stories, you know, people who have, Kim Schreier is a doctor, but she's also diabetic. She has a pre-existing condition. She understands the fear of what if they take away, the ban on pre-existing conditions, right? These women are talking about their lives. They're not talking about policy. And like, I'm a policy wonk. I worked for Hillary, and God knows that woman's a policy wonk. But I want to hear, like, what's compelling to voters is when you talk about something you actually understand. And that's a part of what we look for. But again, this cycle, we don't know, they're coming to us. And it's wonderful.
Well documented that there's a transition period from the time of election day to inauguration day, and normally, regardless of politics, teams from either administration, outgoing or incoming, coordinate during this transition just to figure out like where the light switches are and who sits where and how this works, just the logistics of moving into a brand new building, let alone then running the country. The Trump administration went out of their way to not coordinate. They just didn't show up to meetings with representatives from the Obama administration. So because of that, I like to say, well, I give them benefit of the doubt. It's a new team. At the same time, they didn't do anything to try to figure out how things worked. And so few of them came from a background in government, which means it was basically, I feel like, I always like to say I was very underqualified to work in the Obama White House, but I think I might have been overqualified to work in the Trump White House with my Craigslist background. So this is why they won't let me talk in schools. They're like, you're not impartial. But no, so what was frustrating during the 2 months with the Trump administration is they didn't really want us in the room, or they didn't express any interest. And part of that might have been suspicion that we were leftovers from the Obama administration. But I think a big part of it is that Donald Trump loves to talk about fake news and him being falsely represented in the media. And if there was a transcript, which is really just a record of exactly what was said, it would be easy to prove exactly what was said, which would, I think, hinder his campaign of false and fake and lies that he loves to go for. So that's why I don't know if it's gotten better, but I think what's interesting is I actually wrote a New York Times op-ed about it because he met with Theresa May, this is a few months ago, and he was quoted in The Sun about saying disparaging remarks about Theresa May, and he was like, I didn't say that. And it's like, well, there should have been a stenographer in the room, and if there was, you could just hold up the transcript and say, see? And that happened in the Obama administration, which was always a great day for the stenographer's office. When President Obama would be like, check out the transcript, and be like, yeah, he said it! Yeah. But I would love to hear President Trump say, check out the transcript. I'm just not going to hold my breath, because the transcript reflects the truth, and he doesn't really want the truth out there. But he's just a good guy. He would always go out of his way to not just acknowledge whoever he was meeting, but also just to kind of give a shout out to the people on the periphery, which one of my favorite stories is just he was in the elevator at the end of a long day. We were somewhere, I think maybe Ohio, 'cause we're always in Ohio. It's like the default. And there's an advance team everywhere that he goes, and they're there to prepare every step that he takes. And so this one girl was new to the advance team, and she was the hotel coordinator. And so they were like, okay, when he gets on at the end of the night, he'll be with his doctor, the nurse, body man, and all you have to do is push the button. And he's going to be exhausted, so don't look at him, don't talk to him, just push the button. So he gets on, and he's like, evening. And she's just like, hello, sir, pushes the button, door's closed. And he's a writer. He's like very aware of dynamics. So this kind of perks his interest because also everyone stares at him like he's living history, which in a way he was. So he's like, just staring at the button. So he's like, how's your night going? And she's like, fine, sir. Just like won't make eye contact with him. And so he's like, oh, cool. Like, you having a fun time? She's like, yes, sir. And he just loses it. He's like, what's going on? And she turns and she's like, they said just to look at the buttons. And he just like cracks up, like open mouth, guffawing, and it's just like, no way, like this world is too big, like you're too important, you're part of the team, never just look at the buttons. And that's who he is. He is very much a mentor. He still has his community organizer roots. He wants to make everyone feel a part of the team. I was on the road traveling, and the one time I ever messed up, there were 2 times I messed up. The first time, there were 3 times I messed up. The first time was, they were always on the plane. Yeah, thank you. I actually, the first time was there was a lot of turbulence, and I was holding my microphone to Jay Carney, the press secretary at the time, and I accidentally socked him in the mouth. But there was turbulence. But it was just terrible because it was my first time, so I was really trying to like get good audio, and then it just backfired. And he like for a month after that, every time he saw me coming, he's like, oh no. Second time I messed up, this was the only time that really was a bad call on my part, was President Obama. The plane is very loud, which is why I had to hold a microphone up to Jay Carney's face or anyone who was speaking, because the engine is very loud. It's a comfortable plane, but it's loud. And the first time I was supposed to cover an interview with President Obama on the plane, I just sort of freaked out and was like, I don't want to put a microphone in his face. I just can't do it. So I just put recorders down. And that was the one time Peggy was ever very mad at me, because they were able to transcribe it, but it took, to get back to your question, it took 4 hours when it should have taken 20 minutes, because they had to do all of these manipulations of outside noises through ExpressScribe. It was a disaster. And she was like, he knows it, you know it. And that's also a big difference. You know, President Trump didn't like to be recorded, in part because he doesn't like microphones anywhere near him, including the boom mics. And I think that's just because he's worried about his hair coming off. But with President Obama, he really understands the idea that everyone's there for a reason, everyone's serving a role, and he sort of trusts the process. And so he never balked at the idea of me having a microphone. He knew that that was part of the process. But that first time, I just freaked out. And then I learned my lesson. And then the third time, I don't know if it was really my fault, but we were flying back from Cambodia, and everyone was done. It was like a 10-day Asia swing. Everyone was exhausted. And I took an Ambien and then a glass of wine. I was done. And then apparently there was rocket fire from Palestine into Israel. So then that meant Ben Rhodes went back to tell the press about it. I didn't know. And he didn't tell me, because it was just supposed to be a statement, or not a statement, an off the record thing. So he was like, I didn't need you. It was just going to be me telling them. And he went back and ended up talking to them for quite a while, and I wasn't there. So actually, it's Ben Rhodes' fault. So anyway, I wake up to Jeff Mason, a Reuters reporter, like shaking me awake when we landed in Germany, and he was like, hey, I'm really sorry, but we kind of gaggled without you, but can you type up the transcript? And I was basically like a bear being woken up out of hibernation halfway through, and I was like, what do you mean you gaggled without me? And I just became this like insane person, and just like I felt so betrayed. I started yelling at Ben Rhodes, who was like my boss's 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 boss. And I was like, I can't believe you would do this to me. And it was... So then I'm yelling at Ben Rhodes, and everyone is like waking up in the staff cabin being like, what is going on? And then Jay Carney stumbles down in like his flannel pajamas, and he was like, what, Beck, why are you so angry? And I was like, he gaggled without me. He knows the rules. And I loved, and then Jay Carney said, or maybe Ben said to Jay, they were like, Beck thinks that we're assholes. And I was like, I don't think you're assholes. I just think you're arrogant. And then I stomped down and started to type this transcript. But like between like my drug-addled mind and the fact that it was really bad audio, it was from a New York Times reporter's iPhone. So I'm trying to listen to it not through my equipment. I'm trying to type it, and Ben Rhodes is over my shoulder being like, Beck, I don't think I would have said that this was divisive and problematic. I think I was trying to say diplomatic. And I was like, all right, well, why don't you just proofread this thing? So then I made my boss's boss proofread it. And it was fine. And then the next morning I woke up sobbing. I was like, I'm getting fired. And instead, it's just, from then on, I was included in every gaggle.
So it worked.
It worked. So really, I just messed up twice.
That's all the time we have. If you guys want to buy books.
Wait, can I just say one nice thing? Because I don't want to end on messing up or Trump. I'd rather. I would like to say two big lessons I learned from working in the Obama White House. One is to look up. I think it's really easy. We're all very busy people, and there's a lot of reasons to be extremely stressed, and sometimes it's just really helpful to be like, okay, where am I right now? This is really cool. I need to just be present in this moment. And I learned that from the first time we flew into Burma. We had a very packed schedule. We were only staying there for the day. We weren't even sleeping there. And as we flew in, President Obama looked out the window. So technically he looked down, but it's this idea of looking up. And he saw this pagoda and was like, what is that? We need to go to that. And so it was only like a 5-minute drive from one of the palaces that we were going to anyway for a bilateral meeting. And because President Obama took the time to look out the window and not be so caught up in like his personal role, but sort of the bigger world around him, we went to that pagoda. Which, you know, is what stands out in my mind. And so much a part of being on this planet is finding the humanity and the culture and the heart around us. So that was a big one. And the other one is just to be really kind to each other, which, I mean, you guys all love The West Wing, so you already know that. I feel like The West Wing breeds kindness. But President Obama was extremely kind to everyone. And he wasn't impatient. He's, you know, notoriously patient. But this idea that if he can say hi to people and he can find the time to just be like, how are you doing today? I think we all can, and it makes a big difference. Which I always remind myself of when someone's like road raging, and I'm like, all right, well, President Obama would be like, that's cool. So yeah, look up and be kind. And thank you for coming.
The thing that I would look at West Wing and say, well, that's not like it is that, you know, it was well acted, it was smartly produced. They would have a problem, they'd be talking in the Oval Office, they go back to the press room, and they would solve that in 30 seconds of clever dialogue. And I would say to my wife, who is sitting right there, you know, you could solve that problem, but it would take about 2 years and, you know, 100 meetings and 200 memos, and it would be abandoned and brought up again, and then somebody would find some way to solve it. That's real life. So there was a big difference between West Wing and real life, but which is fine, because what people say about fiction, and I've written novels, and I think it's true, is that good fiction is like real life with the dull parts left out. And so there were a lot of dull parts left out.
I'm 27, and this is my business card. Right? Well, I was going to say a little more about that. I mean, it doesn't take long to read it, but you know, I may seem a little irreverent, and I am, and that's kind of one of my coping mechanisms from that time. But have no doubt that I certainly appreciate the honor and the thrill that it was to work on the White House staff, and certainly to be the person with the demonstrative adjective next to President's aide. And what's important about that, and to understand the role, and of course, this is the role that Charlie Young was the character on the series. The President's aide is kind of like Tigger. There's only one. There are 5 military aides who carry the nuclear football. There are several Secret Service agents who are always on the president's body at any time. There's a press secretary, deputy press secretary, multiple deputy chiefs of staff. There's only one president's aide. And that's both by design and maybe designed to torture you, but you really are an appendage of the president himself, or hopefully herself someday, because you function as a part of their brain that they hopefully don't have to use. And the way I describe the job on a day-to-day basis is basically every morning or every night before, he and I would receive the same binder full of materials. And it was our job to get through the day that binder represented together. And let me tell you, it almost never happened the way it was designed in the binder. And I can also tell you that he rarely had time to read everything that was in the binder, so therefore I had to do that. You have to be a detective. Here I am, looking through my peephole into the Oval Office. Betty Curry is there, Miss Lanahan in the series, of course. And I jealously guarded this peephole. This was not for other people to take advantage of the president's privacy, but it was an important tool for me to know what was going on and whether it was the right time to do something. You have to be able to get the president's attention. Next, please. You have to be comfortable not getting the president's attention. You have to be resourceful. So this was an Oval Office address The president shows up and he's got blood on his collar. He cut himself shaving, something that many of us do who shave. And he was ticked off about something else, but also about the blood. So I thought, hey, liquid paper. Let's put liquid paper on the blood. Yeah. So I'm sad to say it didn't really work, and it ruined the shirt. But it bought time for the valets to bring a fresh shirt over, and it certainly gave people a laugh. So it broke the tension. I think that history is just comprised of 1,000 little jigsaw puzzle pieces, and I think I can speak for all of us in saying that none of us are gigantic pieces, but it sure gives us a lot of pride to be small pieces of it. This image is a summit held with President Clinton, Yasser Arafat, King Hussein, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, who's obscured in the picture, and Yitzhak Rabin before he was assassinated. This was actually the week before he was assassinated. And one of my jobs as a president's aide was kind of the last point of quality control. And so when the president's going to be on camera, I have to make sure that he looks right, hence taking care of the blood on the collar. So here I am briefing all the leaders where to stand, reminding them. And I look at President Clinton, and his tie's a little off. And I say, Mr. President, you got to straighten your tie a little bit. And next photo. So that resulted in everybody following suit. And Barb Kinney, who's one of the photographers, won an award for this photo. She entitled it Primping for Peace. She gave me a signed copy as a going-away gift. And, it literally, the happenstance falls into play here, too, because Yasser Arafat doesn't wear a tie. He wears a kind of military, or did wear, he's passed away now, too. Actually, 3 of these guys are passed away, and one of them is in prison, I believe. And President Clinton's still going fairly strong. Anyway, Arafat didn't wear a tie, but Barb and I happened to be standing on that side of the room, as you can see from the other photos. So she was in the perfect position and the perfect angle to capture this when everybody started mimicking President Clinton primping for peace.
There was one thing that we do that I hope continues after 2020. We fact-checked. We really did. And not just if a statistic was right, but if we generalized, was that appropriate? Or was it a hasty generalization based on too little facts? That took a lot of going around. We didn't just email something. I had to walk over and say, could you look at this and tell me if it's right? So if you don't work as a team, you really can't produce the kind of work that you should.
There's a million things I could ask, but I'm going to start by asking you all to sum up your experience on the West Wing in just 3 words. I did give them a heads up. This is not as mean as it sounds.
Yeah, it is kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. For me, it's very simple.
See, he's going first so that he gets it,
I know.
and we can't if he takes one of our words. Sneaky Duffy.
Best ensemble ever. Including others.
That feels like a cheat.
It is.
No, that was a good answer.
That was a really good answer. I'd say inspiring, proud building. I know that's not a word, but I'm creating one. Proud inducing. And I would say unforgettable. Unforgettable, #life-changing.
We didn't have hashtags back then.
Yeah.
Mine came pretty easy to me. It was dream come true.
Mine are excellence, service, family.
Okay, my experience is different than their experience, so my 3 words are Aaron Sorkin's brain.
Snuffy, just so you know, yesterday during the opening ceremonies, everyone hummed the theme song, and it was pretty magical.
Can you all do it again?
Yeah.
I don't believe you did it.
in the sky.
No, the bridge.
That was amazing.
Wow. That's impressive.
The scene where President Bartlett is in the Oval Office with his priest, it's the death penalty episode with Carl Malden. And I found that a really profound exchange and experience because it is the pull between the man and the office. And as a Catholic, not believing in the death penalty, but as the president representing the people who do, like that battle, I think is beautiful and profound. And watching a leader struggle with doing what's right, I hope that we always can, moving forward, have leaders who debate on a deep level and personal level that, but for real.
Starting now.
And I think that is something that we can all aspire to have and fight to have. And I think that we deserve it as a nation.
All of my favorite scenes were the ones that the whole cast was in. Like when we got to work with all of the lead actors, and we were all, when I was present with all of them and hearing them go back and forth, because there's not like one main memory that stands out to me because so much of it was brilliant. But I liked the way the entire cast interacted. And I liked that most of those actors came from very big theater backgrounds. So to watch that process as an actor in the room with them, you're just going, oh my gosh, this is like brilliance at work, and watching them tweak things and watching them walk and talk and do these long monologues. And you're thinking, if I have one line and I mess up the one line, I will hurt myself. So you're like this, oh my gosh, I have one line. Oh my gosh, come in at the right time. Don't trip the actor, just say your line. But it was, to me, it was that banter between everybody on set and being there when Martin Sheen was there. And I don't know, you all probably know this, Martin Sheen is one of the most lovely, most generous people to work with.
Ever. Even as just a human, not just work with. He's that in real life, too.
And he was like that on set. Like, he wouldn't talk to just the lead actors. He would go talk to everybody.
Extras,
He'd talk to
crew.
the background.
He took everyone on a bus, and we played bingo and went to Vegas every Thanksgiving.
Treated us to Vegas and let us bring our, person.
$1,000 bingo games.
Put us up in a hotel.
He's the best.
It was like, So I think, not to sound trite, because there were so many moments that I thought were great, and I would, like, Duffy, I'd have to go back and rewatch everything. But those moments when we were all together are the moments that really made me go, I'm so happy to be here.
At the table reads, you would watch him, and he would actually be conducting. And I mentioned this to him because I actually did an interview with Aaron for my theater company, and I said, you actually were conducting. He goes, I know. Because it is a sympathy. Symphony, if you think about it. It's all these things going on, and these little, the background people are little instruments as well, and everything just creates this big symphony that happens in front of you.
I was in a car with Martin driving. He was introducing the opening of the Institute of Peace at the University of San Diego, and I was going down with him for that. And we were just talking, and he said, I never went to college, but everyone says that those were the best years of their lives. And he said, but they wish that they had appreciated that at the time. And he said, West Wing, those were the best years of our lives, but we did appreciate it. And I think that's true. I really do. And I think part of that was because of, I think Martin and John were like the mom and dad, and it wasn't an accident. They talked about it. They decided, and they said, we're going to show everybody how this is going to go down, and this is going to be a loving, egalitarian, respectful set, and it was.
You dropped your egos at the door and just you did your job.
And they showed up on time for everything. They showed up with their lines on, like they set the example for everybody else. And Dulé said this to me just recently because he was 23 when we started, and he said that was such a great thing to see as a young actor, and I've brought that to every single set that I've gone on to, and I think the ripple effects of that are extraordinary.
Yeah, I talked to Aaron actually about 9 months ago or something. We were shooting a documentary, and Aaron was there, and he was in the middle of Molly's game, and he really didn't want to talk much about it. And what he did say was that you know, I'm not sure how I would write it that it would work now. He
Wow.
said, I'd have to write it down the middle because any way you write it, 50% of the United States is going to turn you off.
Yeah.
So as politicized as we are now, and to be honest, he was in the middle of Molly's game, so he didn't really care about that question too much.
Right.
He was in the editing seat.
Wow.
I don't even know if it could be on network television. I don't know, because I don't think network would afford it. It's not really network anymore.
It was an expensive show.
It was.
to do. We used to notoriously run over, but they gave Aaron a lot of leeway because the show was such a hit. So he had a lot of, I don't know, I could see Aaron writing something along the lines because he really is political, and even if you ever just hear him speak anywhere, he's really brilliant. Like, he's very interesting, he's funny, he's witty, he's got views, and he gets them out quickly. So he's such an interesting person to just listen to. I think he's hilarious to listen to, and really smart, and his mind is always working. I don't know if he would revamp The West Wing, but I could see him doing something else along the lines of politics. You know, something that has to do with, definitely in this climate and what's going on. I could
sure he
see
has a
him.
lot to say.
He has a lot to say,
Yeah.
and I'm
Maybe that's
sure
would be a consulting
it
type
will
of
come.
thing.
Yeah, I'm sure on some level he might think about creating something, but I don't think the way it was.
I mean, I have no idea. I probably know less about it than any of you in this room. You probably know more about the possibility of it than I do. But I do think that what you were saying about Aaron's writing and what he cares about, I think at least what I got from The West Wing, and he said this, is that it was a love letter to public service. But to me, it's also about values and how policy is really a reflection of our values. It's not boring. It's how we put our values into action and how they affect people's lives. And I think he was able to convey that in a way that was emotionally evocative so we could connect to it. And I think that's a missing right now, that there is a delineation between what we feel and about policy, like it's dry, but it's not. That's what affects our lives. And I think we need to make that emotional connection again, and so that we all know what our elected officials are doing on our behalf in our name and how it affects our lives, our neighbors' lives, other countries, and have that connection to it and know that we're responsible for it. And I think he did that better than on this show, better than anyone I've ever seen ever in my life. And I think there's a huge value to that, and we could have that now and have that be socially important. I really do.
Well said.
That's a great argument.
People in the podcast said that was the first time I've ever heard the word autism on TV. And that's big. You know, disabilities, there's so much stigma around disabilities, any type of disabilities, of just, you know, you hide that person away, you don't talk about it, pretend everything's normal. There are even minor characters with disabilities. One of my favorite episodes is Celestial Navigation, where Josh is giving a talk at Georgetown, or George Washington, I think, when, you know, Justice Mendoza gets arrested, and the host, I guess, the person that is meeting with Josh on the stage, has some type of physical disability. He has arm crutches. It never says why. That never plays into anything. You know, that's just
I never noticed he had crutches.
You just see it for a couple seconds. It has nothing to do with his character or the plot. So that had to have been a conscious choice for, I don't know whether that would have been the director or the writer, but, you know, some decision went into, okay, here's a random character that we're not going to see again. Let's, you know, maybe give him these arm crutches to, again, put another person with authority. Like, I don't know who that guy was at his university, but he had to have been a big deal if he was interviewing Josh Lyman.
Right.
And so, you know, this big deal academic guy has a physical disability and was able to achieve that with his physical disability. So I really appreciated The West Wing showing these characters, you know, with their disabilities, but showing them for who they are and kind of their brains and their talent, not just their body.
I guess I should probably start with why I became an actor in the first place. And it really wasn't about the glamorous pieces of it, or it wasn't really even about wanting to be famous. It was about people, and it was about stories and sharing those stories, and stories that might otherwise not get heard. it was about working on characters whose externals might be very different from mine, and seeking to find a deeper understanding about our common humanity. It somehow felt comforting to me to know that we all suffer and struggle and experience joy and failures and love and loss. And it somehow made me feel less alone. And I believe that art is how we share the experience of what it is to be human. I believe that art can build the muscle of empathy, and it can help really, through empathy, move positive social change. I think art is incredibly powerful. I remember when I first started at the neighborhood playhouse, we were asked by one of our teachers, and it was really one of the first, I think it might have even been the first class of the first day, what is acting? What is to act? So, of course, we're all sitting there trying to figure out the best answer and the most perfect answer. And so we were all saying really ridiculous, complicated things. And the teacher just stopped us. And you can shout out, what is to act to you? What is to act? Does anyone have an idea? What is to act? That's a good one. That's absolutely true. To act is? Embody a different person. To what? To do. To act is to do, right? I mean, it's all of those other things too, but at its most simplistic thing, to act is to do, and obviously that's a great lesson for acting, but it's been an even more useful lesson for me in life. To act is to do. It's not to hope that somebody else does it. It's not to hope that the situation will suddenly become right for me to act, or the situation will, or for someone to choose me to act or to invite me to do. It's not to wait till I'm perfect or the situation's perfect to do. It's just simply to act. And when you see a wrong, you act to right that wrong. And that lesson has shaped my life more than any other. Janelle actually made a joke about it. She's like, you're the only person who I know when they cry about their job, it's a good thing. Martin offered to narrate that film too, and it's actually a great, I'm very proud of that film. And working on that film, I was able to get to know some of the men and women and that we profiled and what they have gone through, and what some of our veterans and their families are facing when they return home from service. And while all this was happening, a dear friend of mine who'd been struggling with substance use disorder ended his own life. And soon after that, Martin Sheen asked me to come speak at National Association of Drug Court Professionals conference here in DC, and I did. And Martin has been an advocate for drug treatment courts since the early days of drug treatment courts, when it was a really heavy lift. And he has been, yes. And he has continued to be an advocate for these courts for over 2 decades. And, when I attended that conference, I learned why, because I was hooked. So we had just completed the film. The CEO of National Association of Drug Court Professionals had called me to let me know that they had just launched this Veterans Treatment Court division called Justice for Vets, and that they were going to hold the first ever National Veterans Treatment Court Conference in DC. I offered him the movie. I said if you wanted to screen it at the conference, I would come and bring the director and one of the veterans we profiled. He liked the idea, and as he was hanging up the phone, he said, by the way, we're looking for a new director for Justice for Vets. And without thinking, from sitting on my bed out in California, I said, gosh, if I were a veteran, I would throw my hat in the ring. And 2 days later, he called back and he said, were you serious? And I said, yes. And he said, well, when can you start? And it was October. And I said, how about January? And he said, how about Monday? And I said, how about January? And he said, how about Monday? And I said, well, before I start, I really want to make sure that I'm the right person, because I'm not a veteran. I want to make sure that we think that I'm the right person for this job at this moment. And I need to call a couple people to see if that's right. And if I'm not, we'll find the right person, and I'll help you. And I thought of one person, and I called him, and it was Tommy Riemann. Tommy was one of the men that we profiled in Halfway Home. And on December 3rd, 2003, Tommy Riemann and his team were on a reconnaissance mission in Iraq when his convoy came under heavy enemy fire. Tommy used his own body to protect his men. He was shot twice. He suffered 11 shrapnel wounds, but he refused to be carried off. He continued to use his body as a human shield. He took charge. He moved the convoy out of the line of fire, and for his actions that day, Tommy received the Silver Star. He was acknowledged by President Bush in the 2007 State of the Union address, where he received a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. There was an action figure after Tommy, a video game after Tommy. Tommy is an American hero. But amid the accolades and the honors, Tommy was suffering. Tommy had PTSD. He was self-medicating with alcohol and drugs to cope. This was even several months after appearing in Halfway Home, where he was exploring on film his struggles. He was still in a tremendous amount of pain, and after a night of heavy drinking and pills, he left a note for his children, and he drove his truck into a tree, attempting to end his own life. Miraculously, he survived, but he was facing legal charges for driving while impaired. I spoke to Tommy on the phone about justice for vets just when this had happened. And he said, Melissa, you have to do this job. There's no veterans treatment court where I live in North Carolina. You have to do this job, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to jail, but I'm going to help you. So Tommy wasn't asking me to do this job to help him. He was asking for all the other veterans out there who needed a veterans treatment court and didn't have access to one because there wasn't one available. And I do not think that this nation is better off by having men and women like Tommy behind bars. I believe we are best served when Tommy and other veterans like Tommy receive the help that he needs, deserves, and has earned. So he can go home and be a father to his children, a son to his parents, and a leader in his community. And I believe we're best served when every veteran gets that opportunity. My dad has been in criminal justice for most of my, well, all of my life that I can remember, actually. First as a district attorney, a prosecutor, and then as a judge. And he was one of the people who launched the first mental health court in Philadelphia many years ago, and he believes that treatment works and that treatment courts work and that it is the best way to serve justice. And I remember when I first asked him about it, when Martin first told me about drug courts, I'm like, Dad, what do you know about treatment courts? He goes, Melissa, anybody who knows anything about these courts is for them. They're for them because they work. And it is in these courtrooms where we see the incredible capacity of human beings to change. It is in drug courts, veterans treatment courts, DUI courts, family drug courts, juvenile drug courts, where we see individuals who are mired in the deepest depths of addiction find hope, find empowerment, and we see a system that has for so long been a force of only punishment become an environment of healing and compassion and mutual accountability. And the treatment courts are recovery courts, and they're recovery courts because the people involved are given the opportunity for treatment and lasting recovery from addiction. And they are recovery courts because they are helping a system recover from policies that have discarded those who are addicted instead of helping them to break free. I believe that we have everything that we need to solve all the world's problems. We just have to care enough to do it. And I absolutely believe that. And I also believe that it is worth pausing for a moment to acknowledge the great success that we've had and to build upon that success, and celebrating the fact that these recovery courts are actually life-saving miracles, and they're miracles that will continue to save lives, to reunite families, strengthen our communities long after we all are gone. And this is our legacy. And those miracles are made possible because people like you and people like all of you and people who work in these courts care enough to do it. I think that true greatness can really only be found in service. And Martin Luther King, and I hope I don't misquote, but has something that I kind of carry around with me, and I hope I'm carrying it around correctly, but everybody can be great because anybody can serve. And I believe that, and thank you all for being so great.
The only thing I didn't do is, so in my book, there's like a very scandalous affair with a senator, and this is actually very true, and I know about it, and he's still an elected senator. But I didn't out the person. Though every day that passes by, I still think it might be the time. Yeah, so other than that, I mean, almost everything that happened in this book happened in 99% happened in real life.
Has anyone said anything to you?
No, I mean, they used to read it aloud in the Politico newsroom after it came out, and then like people would take covert pictures and send them to me, and everyone would like speculate who they were. And I'd be like, I didn't like you enough to put you in the book. But yeah, like, no, crazy stuff happened, and it was really an unsupportive kind of it was very competitive, and so there was a lot of like a lot of backstabbing, a lot of crazy things that happened. I mean, like, we used to have a media trainer who would like work with us to be on TV, and she was awful. She was so cruel. She would be like, you are fat, you are old, you are horrible. So I had to put that in. And then like another reporter I knew, she had like 45 minutes at the White House, 15 minutes at the White House, and she came out like after 10, and her colleague was like, oh, can I have your last 5 minutes? And she was like, actually, I just thought of more questions, and went back in and like kept talking. And it was crazy. Yeah, it was just, there was so much fodder to use that I really had to use it. And then I was also touching on like new media as a whole. I had a friend who worked at Gawker in New York, and they used to have on the wall like how many page views your article had. And like as the day went by, you would like see your article like plummet and feel all this pressure to keep going. So I really want to touch on like just how crazy new media is, and if you're just not a person built for that kind of environment, it can really suck.
Two-thirds of the states, 34 states, can collectively call for a resolution for an Article 5 convention. Now, in this convention, delegates selected by state officials go to represent the states. When they go to represent the states, they collect, they gather information from everywhere, they propose, they have a big convention talking about what this article should be like. It's limited to what all the state resolutions call for, so it's, consolidated into just one topic. It also has a lot of checking power, so it doesn't go crazy, so they don't go off topic, so they can't do anything like, rewrite the whole Constitution. This is all written in the Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. And it cannot, an amendment to the Constitution cannot be overturned without another amendment. Next slide, please. So this is Lawrence Lessig. He was a young guy when this episode aired. I don't know why they just didn't have Lawrence Lessig instead of Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd did a hell of a job, I'll say that. So Lawrence Lessig agrees with Wolf-PAC. He came to our workshop this year in August and gave a speech about how money has a corrupting influence in our politics. And he states that Article 5 is a guaranteed solution to our problem. Having an Article 5 convention, giving the power back to the states, is our solution. We can't rely on Congress. Congress is so corrupted by money. How could we remotely rely on them? We need to bring the power back to us. We need to lobby our representatives. We need to gather everybody together and say, hey, we want an Article 5 convention. What he's asking is, what exactly are we looking to do with 20th Amendment? He said, are we looking to overturn Citizens United or something else? We are looking to overturn Citizens United to an extent. We're looking to go all the way back. The issues in this country really seriously stem from Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976. Buckley v. Vallejo laid the groundwork for Citizens United. So by overturning, by not essentially overturning, by fixing our campaign finance laws in the country, we can fix Citizens United decision. We could fix Buckley v. Vallejo, McCutcheon v. FEC. We could fix all these issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our featured performer this evening, cellist Dorothea Ratz.
God,